Hi, welcome to the channel. My name's Tracy and this is the first of a three-part program that is aimed at allowing you to get the most out of Jupiter transiting Pisces from January to May of 2022. So there's a whole lot of things I'm getting used to doing. I'm doing screencasting at the same time as recording. So bear with me as we fumble our way through making this first video. So I just wanted to, I suppose, just open up the space a little and talk about a couple of kind of housekeeping things. Firstly, it would be great if you like this video to hit the like button on YouTube's and also to hit the subscribe button to make sure you're getting up-to-date content. That would be very awesome. So why am I offering this? Why am I doing this freebie? There's a few reasons for that, and there is an opportunity, if you find value in this, to donate. So all the details for how to donate will be in the comments below. But for me, this is really kicking off the new concept of combining cosmology, astrology, and Kundalini Yoga together. So I really wanted an opportunity to kind of launch something, fumble my way through a bit, try and figure out, what people want and how to deliver the content. But I also just thought it was a great idea to throw myself in because I feel very passionately about this time in 2020 where we have this great opportunity to amp up, I suppose, in terms of where we're going to be going for the next number of years and how we're going to start embedding and embodying the things that have really come up for us over the last couple of years. I think there's been a lot of deep work by people. There are new forms of leadership coming through, and this is not only about the cosmology of, how do I make the most out of Jupiter's luck and expansion, but really how do you expand yourself? How do you find ways to move from into this space of abundance, of even if that's expression of yourself. So this free program is both an offering, but it's also for me to develop and also for me to start sharing the things that have been coming through for me. Hopefully this works for you. So anyway, this particular video will be less about looking at my mug and we'll be doing some on-screen stuff. All of this is edutainment only, so take what you will, leave the rest. But my desire is out of this, there's two really key things you'll get out of this video. One, I'm going to show you how to cast your natal astrology chart. Now that's a beautiful skill to have. And that may start leading you down the pathway of learning astrology. And I wholeheartedly encourage people to do it. I've found it to be a deeply satisfying process in terms of helping me to understand myself. It's been a very, very wonderful pathway for me to go down. And the second part of that is that out of that, we're going to identify what we call the houses that will be impacted by this transit, because that in the next two parts of this program is what we'll specifically work with to allow you to focus kind of intent. And also there's space in between each of the videos to give time for a reflective period. So without further ado, and just let me look at my list. Have I said everything I wanted to say? Yes, I have. So I'm going to go off screen and we're going to go onto the screens and you'll just hear my voice. Oops. All right. See, as you can see, fumbling my way through stuff. So hopefully you can see my screens on here now. And what you'll see is I'm sitting on the Deeper Daily Life, my view of the channel. So I haven't really been doing much actively on YouTube. So really for me, this is beginning to amp it up. So come on in, subscribe, let's get some numbers up and like videos, and then that will help with the algorithms. And this is where you'll be finding this video, of course. So, I thought about and I checked out some ways that were going to be easy for people to run their and generate their natal chart. And what I decided to go with is called Astroseq. So Astroseq.com has been around for a long time, and it has a great many tools and features. But as you can see here, when you search for Astroseq, it comes up with the birth chart calculator, as well as a number of other things. Now, one of the reasons I love this is, and there's no affiliate action for me on this, is it's really simple. You can put your details in, generate it, and you don't have to sign up to anything or do anything particularly fancy. So while I was checking out a number of these sites, I've ended up creating a bit of a spam event in my email address because some of them, they basically harvest your email address. So with this one, you will literally be able to create a birth chart and nobody will be using your deets. So if you then decide that you actually do want to sign up for it, you can. Now there's other sites as well that you could sign up for. So astro.com is another one that I've used a lot. So when we go into the birth chart and actually generating the birth chart, it's actually under here, under that first. So if you end up not coming in through that link, it's in here under birth natal chart online calculator. So, and when you come down to here, you'll find there's a whole bunch of stuff going on this screen. But basically, where we're coming to is this box here. So in this box, it's called the Birth Chart Astrology Online Calculator, and it's asking you to enter your birth data. So in doing that, and we'll just hit agree down there, what we're doing is essentially capturing the date, the time, and as to the most accurate that you can, and very importantly, the birth city. So when the chart's being generated, we need to know what date. The timing is really important in terms of your rising and ascendancy information, as well as a whole bunch of other things, but for the purposes of this, to help identify the houses and the birth city. So let's, for example, I'm just going to leave that as the default 1st January 1977, and let's choose a time, let's say 6:09 p.m. Now you'll see here there's an unknown time box. Now if you do not know your time, you're going to have to click this box here, which will basically override, and it sets it as a sunset chart. Now I'm going to have a little bit of separate guidance for people who don't know their time, because I think to get the most out of this transit for Jupiter will be really useful if you can hone in a little bit more around what houses are being impacted, or what areas of your life are being impacted. So then the next thing that we want to put in is the birth city. So let's go Mildura. I just happen to know somebody that's been up there on holidays, so hence why I don't live in Mildura. I don't even know anybody that does live in Mildura. So as you can see, we've got all the data in here, good to go. So there is a way that you can enter coordinates manually. That is if your birth city doesn't come up. So it's doing its bit, and what it's done now is actually generated the natal chart. It's so exciting. So what you'll see here, it's actually showing the time we entered, so the local time, which is Australian Eastern Standard Time for us in Australia. But then it shows the UTC time. So it's showing that kind of, that adjusted time. The house system, there are various different house systems, and that's essentially kind of how the start and end and descendancies and ascendants and mids example are calculated. So we're not going to worry about that. Just leave it as Placidus at this point in time. then if we come down here, this is a natal chart. So what are we seeing on the screen? Basically, a whole bunch of bits and bobs, symbols, lines. What does it all mean? But to be very simple, thank you. What we're basically going to focus on for the next piece is around what we call the Pisces, what we call Pisces as the sign, and what we call the house that Pisces is residing in. So just briefly, around this, let me just bring it up a bit bigger. So around the outside of the circle, the natal chart, are these symbols. So these symbols are the signs. So in this case, this sign here is actually Gemini. So it's showing that Gemini for this particular chart is on the ascendant line. So when you ever hear somebody calling about the rising, your sun or your moon signs, this is the rising sign. So it's the sign that is sitting against the ascendancy point. So then the signs and their the order that they sit in doesn't change. What does change and what changes this ascendancy line is the time. So if the birth time was, say, another 3 hours, it might push it into a different sign, for example. So it'll have a different time and point. Now what that means is that on this inner wheel, where it's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, these are called the houses. So the houses, the numbering of the houses and the position of them doesn't change. But what you can see, of course, is that if the time that you're born is different, this outside line turns. So you could have a very different sign sitting in your first house. But for this example, the first house is sitting, to begin with, in Gemini, and then the remainder of it is in Cancer. So we go around the houses and we can see there's an overlap between where the house sits and where the sign sits. Now we've got a starting point for a house and then a completion point for a house. So, for example, in the second house, Cancer starts in that second house. It then transitions into Leo. So the majority of this house is showing as Leo. Now there is a system called the full house system, and if we use that, it essentially aligns the house to a full planet sign, I should say, for example. So what you would see, instead of it sitting here at the 15 degrees, it would say that Gemini is the first house. So that can make things a bit easier when we're doing this type of work. But what we will just work on is essentially the sign that's first appearing into that house point, and we'll use that as a reference. So as we go around here, we've got Gemini, Cancer, Leo, Virgo, Libra, Scorpio, Sagittarius, Capricorn, Aquarius, Pisces, Aries. So Pisces is actually, this is the area that we're talking about for the transit of Jupiter. Now what that means is this between 28th of December 2021 and I can't remember what the date is in May, Jupiter is going to be moving through this planet, through this sign. So basically on the 28th of December, Jupiter moved from Aquarius into Pisces and will be making a quick transit, what we call transit, through this sign. So it's going to speedily go through here. Now normally it takes 12 months to go through a sign, but basically it's making most of its transit in 5 months. It's going to then pop into Aries, move forward a little bit, and then retrograde back into Pisces. But what we're interested in is particularly the next couple of months is how we really focus the active energy of Jupiter in this sign. So then what we're looking at is, well, what house does this actually relate to? And in this instance, it's house 9. So the house 9 is going to be the area of life that is the most impacted by this transit. So if you need to take a pause and stop before we move on to go and generate your chart, please do so. And also, if you've got any questions, but just pop them in the comments below, and I'll certainly get back to you on that. I'll be back to you in just a minute. All right, so just had a quick break. If you've had a chance to run your generate your chart, I'm just going to keep going now with a couple of other things. So what else I wanted to point out on this screen before we go to what the houses represent is on the right hand side here. So when you run your chart or generate your chart, it's going to give you planets and positions. So what I just wanted to point out, and this is something that you can learn more about on your own, and I'll have things in the future to talk us through into more detail. But basically, this is telling you where the placement of the planets were at the time you were born. So here we've got the planets from the Sun, Moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune and Pluto. Plus there's a few others. There's one called the Node, one called Lilith, one called Chiron, and we've got Fortune and the Vertex point. Now I'm not going to go into the details of these, but just as a point out, so this is telling you exactly the degree of your sun sign. So in this instance, for this person's chart, the Sun, which if we go into the chart is here, Sun is in Capricorn, 10 degrees and 30, 10 degrees basically. And the Moon is at 14 degrees in Libra. I'm having a Libra moment today. So what if you look at that? So you've got a Sun and a Moon there in relationship on a page, but I'm not going to go into any more detail about that. But if you did want to, start looking into what does it mean to have a Moon in Libra, then this gives you information about the different planets and some info to look into. Because the more of this that you look at, so basically even what the planets represent, the more it can give you when you're looking at and doing some further research into astrology. Then the other thing I just wanted to point out down here is this shows the ascendant. So this AC is this ascendant point here. Now that's essentially what's considered your rising sign. And when you're reading general astrology, your rising astrology is actually far more representative of the information generally being shared by the astrologers, because they're usually talking about where things are transiting through the houses. So we're going to be working on this kind of, figuring out where Pisces is in all of your charts and then looking at the impacted house. When somebody's doing a general astrology, say for a month, and you're a rising sign, they'll actually be talking about where the various planets are transiting through. And so it can be far more pointed in terms of the relevance to you. So just a little tip there. It's definitely worth using your rising. And then you've got what's called the DC, which is the opposite point to the AC. And then what we have up here is what we call our MC and our IC. So essentially, ascendant is you and how you perceive the world, The IC is your roots and family, and kind of the more kind of hidden, or the more inner pieces of yourself. Your DC is your relationships to others, and your MC is your outer relationship to the world. So it can often represent kind of career and things like that. But to not overly confuse you, just basically the ascendant for general astrology is really useful. And I'll start stopping saying so much. So then the other things down here is just the elements, which basically kind of tell you what the spread of elements is in your chart. And this one's really interesting. So there's no fire. So that means that there are no planets or significant points in fire elements on this person's chart. There's 15 points in earth, 7 in air, and 5 in water. Now, this is very similar to how you would look at, say, an Ayurvedic lifestyle in somebody's kind of doshic body structure. If you had a setup like that, you'd be looking at how to bring fire in to balance out the earth, for example. So when you're looking at the elements, you can kind of say, well, I've got a pretty nice balance between air and water. But I don't have a great balance between earth and fire and the other elements. So that can point to looking at saying, okay, well, where is there a lack of direction, passion, and kind of that fiery energy towards the drive and desire. So this person could be very practical, very, very, very earthy, practical, slow plod, have a good intellectual capacity, and also be quite balanced, watery, but could be absolutely lacking in core motivation and drive or passion. So they could experience kind of a mundaneness, if you like. So that's probably more than I was planning to give you. But anyway, now let's jump over to the 12 houses. So once you've identified the house, the Pisces is going to be occupying. So in this instance, the 9th house. So it could be any of these houses. It could be 1 through to 12. We're then going to look at what those houses are representing. And then that becomes the area where it becomes a focus for you. So really quickly go through these. So the first house is the self, the core essence of yourself, appearances, new beginnings, the body, all the first impressions, your core attitudes, your core identity, and basically your core approach to life. And really that first house is like the ascendant. It's how you fundamentally appear and in the world, and how you see the world. The second house is all about money, work, income, daily routines, all the fundamentals around your survival, being fed, watered, housed, is really about that second house. So, fundamentally, how, almost second chakra, how you feel about your core being. We then have the third house, which is really about the mind, siblings, early development, short travel, any of your mental activities, neighbours, anything in your immediate environment, and how your mind actually works. And then we move fourth, which is home, roots, family, self-care, emotions. So the fourth house is far more around the emotional components of existence and how that's been created through our roots and our family. Fifth house is around romance and love. It's around creativity, fertility. It's a very creation-based energy, but it does cover so many things. It's drama, it's expression, it's love, it's romance, it's children, so many things kind of, around that space of creativity. Sixth house is health, fitness, systems, so the analytics. It's about being a craftsperson. It's about our daily habits, what we essentially do with our time, and how we interact in our more localized space with our time. It governs pets, and it's about service. So how we service and how we connect with the outer world, essentially. Seventh house is all about relationships, and it's not just romantic. It's about any business, marriage, contractual relationships. It's about legal balance, what your interpersonal style is, how you interact with others, is really all that seventh house. Eighth is kind of a much more deeper level of that kind of seventh house. It's about, your real sense of intimacy. So that inner self, around how comfortable you feel across the whole spectrum of kind of sexuality, intimacy. It's about shared finances. So it's anything where you might have finances shared with other business partners, with your family, so it's inheritance, taxes, it's other people's money, so it's all to do with loans and property and things like that. So there's a lot going on in that space around the resources that we have through others, essentially. 9 is about it's philosophy, it's your belief systems, it's world travel, wisdom, it's your connection to religion and the order of things in the world, and can often represent kind of large kind of organizations that represent beliefs. So it can be churches or high institutional schools, universities, that type of thing. So it's kind of where you've developed, or where you're developing yourself in terms of what you offer to the world. And then the actual 10th house is the actual kind of the progression of that 9th house, in that how you show that to the world through the career that you do, your long-term goals, your reputation, public image, all the men in the world. And in fact, actually, interestingly, so 10th house are the breadwinners in the family. So whether that's through your parents, or who the breadwinner was, whereas the 4th house is kind of more the opposite of that. It's the who the homemaker was. So that doesn't have to necessarily be masculine or feminine, but it's generally been represented in the past by that. So yeah, career, fame, like all of that kind of how you end up showing yourself and your legacy to the outside world. And then the 11th house is around our friends, groups, things that we're connected to in terms of our social awareness, humanitarianism, technology, and how that helps or hinders us, hopes and wishes for the future. So this is about really the extension of ourselves in terms of what we give as part of being a human, essentially, to the greater groups and friendship circles. And then the 12th house it says here, endings, healings, closure, spirituality, solitude, karma, old age, afterlife, what's hidden, limiting, beneath. So there's often a real struggle to really nail what the 12th house is about. But the 12th house is really a culmination house. And it's about, it's somewhat hidden. So the 12th house is the culmination of everything that you have done, but it is very spiritual as well. So it's kind of almost the return to source type energy. And so it can represent very many different things, but it can also be, the guru, the teacher, allowing things to come to a natural end, but it's also related to the subconscious and the things that could potentially be limiting to us. So lots of information, and if you've got any questions at all about the what I've been talking through there, I'll just come back on screen. That's all. I know it's a lot of information, but my desire is that you've got a natal chart and you've got at least an idea of the area that is being impacted. We'll talk a little bit more about that in the next video. Pop any questions you've got down below. I will also be doing something to help support those who don't have a time. So doing where you generate the chart here, let me just go back very quickly. If you've ended up with a chart where you've got an unknown time, what's going to happen is, wait for this to come back. I'm just going to update this. I'm going to put this as unknown time and calculate the chart again, because I just want to show you what it's going to do. Yeah, so what it's done, you'll notice there aren't any houses in here. So it strips out the houses because it needs the time to know where the positioning of the house was. So what I would like you to do, if you don't know your time, is having a look at these again. Let me just size that up a bit. Going back to these houses, if you have an opportunity to just reflect into, there might be two. So there might be two things that, as you read through these, you can really see where where you've been doing a lot of developmental work over the last, or there's been a lot of themes relative to that area. So there might be something that resonates for you in terms of these houses, and there might be two. So if there are two, jot those down, and really that can become part of the focus. But as I say, I'll do a little bit more work around what to do when you've got an unknown time. And on that note, I want to thank you for taking the time to cast your chart, and you've taken the first steps to being your own astrologer. So, Sat Nam, see you in the next video.